The Celtic god Toutatis is attested in Gaul, Britain, and Eastern Europe, with an outlying inscription in Rome and perhaps something from Spain. His name is found in several variants. These may reflect different Celtic dialects or different attempts to adapt the Roman alphabet to the spoken Celtic languages. Miranda Green suggests that they may indicate a production by people with low literacy. They may also reflect independent origination. All these factors may be at play. Teutates has become the most commonly used form because it is found in classical sources. However, in the inscriptions we find Toutatis or something similar, and since these were set up by those who worship the god, that's the form I'll use. The evidence for the god comes from three sources. First, the etymology of the name. Second, the inscriptions, including their locations and the deities they refer to. And third, a rarity for Celtic religion, textual references. Toutatis' name is from the Proto-Celtic Teuta, which means tribe. It is the root found in Irish tuha, tribe. The names Toutatis, Teutates, and Toutatis mean roughly father of the tribe. Teutanus and Tautanus would be god of the tribe, and Tautiorix is king of the tribe. These names tell us that he was a god who benefits the people who identify themselves as a tribe, likely as their primary deity. The first thing to consider about the inscriptions is their geographical spread. This map marks out the approximate find spots of inscriptions to Toutatis. Two had to be left out to fit the map, one from Bălesca, Bulgaria, to Toutatis, and one from Drambar in Romania to Toutatis. Also, the one in Spain should be further west in Galicia. It is also possible that there are inscriptions I don't know about, but there are enough here to present at least a somewhat representative sample. The first thing to note is that there is only one inscription from France and none from the Benelux countries, the areas primarily considered to be Gaul. The classical texts, which I'll be talking about later, do attribute the worship of Teutates to the Gauls, but aren't any more specific. We thus have the situation of a deity generally considered to be Gaulish being particularly weak in evidence from Gaul. Second, there are two distinct clumps, one in Britain and one in Central and Eastern Europe. Third, there are a small number of data outside these clumps, two inscriptions in Germany, one in Spain, and one in Rome. Among these inscriptions are rings from Britain that are inscribed T-O-T, which is generally believed to be an abbreviation of something like Toutatis. This would be an expected British version of Toutatis, since the Gaulish diphthong ow becomes an o in Brythonic. That these are intended to represent the name of a god is shown by one being inscribed Deo T-O-T, to the god Toutatis. The personal nature of an inscribed ring makes one wonder, why would an individual wear such a ring? Did it mark out one as a member of a particular tribe? Were they worn by those who had been recognized as special, or were they meant as votive offerings? An examination of the amount of wear on them might prove useful. The inscription from Spain is interesting in that it refers to a hill of Toutatis. This is evidence of his cult. He likely was worshipped on this hill. Worship on high places is common in Indo-European paganism, but was generally not the custom for underworld figures. This tells us then that at least in this case, Toutatis wasn't seen as a divine ancestor. More information can be found in the Celtic and Roman gods we find associated with Toutatis in the inscriptions. At Barkway in Britain, some silver leaves were found with inscriptions. One of them was to Mars Toutatis and another to Mars Alator. Alator, which might therefore be another name or title for Toutatis, likely means nourisher. There is also an inscription at Old Carlisle to Mars Toutates Cocydius, and in another inscription he is associated rather than identified with Cocydius. At Seckau in Austria, Toutatis is connected with Latobius, Marmogius, Senatus, and Mogedius. Based on the name that he is sometimes connected with Jupiter and that he is once called Latobius Augustus, Latobius is almost certainly the patron god of Latobici. He is identified with Mars in other inscriptions as well, and in some he is connected with ships, an odd thing for a god of the landlocked Latobici. This is the only inscription to Senatus, and nothing more of him is known. Although there are other inscriptions to Marmogius, we don't know anything more of him either. Mogedius is known from 4 inscriptions, one of which identifies him with Mars, and one of which calls him Augustus. That both Latobius and Marmogius are called Augustus, a royal title, connects them with Tautiorix, king of the tribe. Taken as a whole, this inscription connects Toutatis with Mars and with the deity or deities of tribal identity and rule. Toutatis is also found with other Roman gods. He is Iom Teutano in Bulgaria and at 2 sites in Hungary. Iom is an abbreviation for Jupiter Optimus Maximus, or Jupiter the best and greatest. At 2 sites in Germany, he is associated with Mercury. Finally, at Wiesbaden, Germany, he is Apollo Tautiaurix. Of Roman gods, then, it is Mars that Toutatis is most often identified with, in inscriptions ranging from Britain to Hungary. We don't have any depictions of Toutatis. We do have depictions of deities with which he is identified, such as Cocytus, who is shown as a god of the Mars type. He may lurk behind Celtic images of the Roman gods with which he is linked, but we have no way of knowing. There is a unique inscription from Rome to Toutatis Madurinus. Madurinus may mean drunkenness or be associated with mead in some way. This may be connected with rituals of kingship, which throughout the Celtic world involved alcoholic drinks. Whether Madurinus is meant to be a title of Toutatis or another god with which he is being connected cannot be proven. My own opinion leans toward the former. These associations are delineated on the map. Those connecting Toutatis with Mars are marked with an M, those with Mercury with an H, the one with Apollo with an A, and those with Jupiter with an I. The inscription to Mars Teutates Cocytus is marked MC, and Toutatis Madurini has a small m. The hill of Toutatis is marked with C, and the spots where the British rings were found with an R. We can therefore look at where the forms of the names are found. We can see from this that there is a strong divide between the western area, where names like Toutatis prevail, and the east, where we find versions with the N infix, such as Tautenus. We also find there the unique Tautiaurix and Tautaticus. One final chart might be useful, giving the locations of Roman deities associated with Toutatis. Here we see a geographical clumping: Mars in England and Austria, Mercury in Germany, IOM in Hungary, and a single Apollo inscription in Wiesbaden. Turning to classical sources, we have the unusual attestation of Gaulish gods in Lucan's Pharsalia, which reads, "And those who pacify with blood accursed, savage Teutates, Jesus horrid shrines, and tyrannous altars, cruel as were those." This is supplemented by 2 glosses from the 9th century, one of which says that Teutates is Mercury, and one which says he's Mars. They also tell us that he received human sacrifices by drowning. Other than confirming that Toutatis could be identified with either Mercury or Mars, and giving one more way to construct his name, this doesn't tell us much about him. Looking at the evidence in total, what does it tell us? First, we have a name which exists in variants. This does not necessarily indicate anything, since this sort of thing is not uncommon with Celtic deities. For instance, the name of the god generally called Tyrannus also appeared as Tanaris, Tyrannicus, and Tyrannuos. Second, these variants are widespread but appear in groups. Third, Toutatis is identified with a number of Roman deities which themselves have little in common. Finally, the etymology of the variant names and the titles he is given indicate a god of the tribe, but not, at least in Galicia, a divine ancestor. It is important to note that the Celts were made up of a number of tribes, and they didn't have a sense that they were all one people. They did not have a pan-Celtic identity, in other words. They didn't think of themselves as Celts, but as Iceni, or Carnutes, or Remi, or members of any of the other numerous tribes. Therefore, the Celts couldn't have had a single god named Toutatis or something related, who was worshipped across the Celtic world. The very idea of a god of the tribe militates against this. Rather, there were individual gods of individual tribes to whom the name was given. The Toutatis of tribe A would have been a different god from the Toutatis of tribe B. This would explain both the variety of names and the number of gods that Toutatis was identified with. God of our tribe would of course be rendered in the dialect of the tribe concerned. It would be used to describe the god thought to watch over that particular tribe. It is possible that the name was invented independently in each area, which might explain the grouping of the variants of his name. It may have originated in each area as a title of a local god, one that might even be known to us in inscriptions, but since he was not identified in those inscriptions with the title Toutatis, we don't know who that god was. This would explain Toutatis Cocytus. I'm not saying that Toutatis should be seen only as a title. In at least some areas, it could well have been the only way the local deity was known, either because it had replaced an earlier name, had been spun off as a separate god from the one who had originally borne the title, or been devised on its own to name a newly emerged god. In any of these cases, it would be perverse to insist that it be called a title rather than a name. That Toutatis was always local would also explain why so many Roman gods were identified with him. The Toutatis of each tribe could well have had aspects not shared by the Toutates of other tribes. The Roman gods could have been interpreted differently in different areas, or some of these aspects could have been more prominent in a given area. One tribe might have preferred to emphasize that he was the chief god in their pantheon and so associated him with Jupiter. Another tribe could have seen their chief god as a protector, so he was Mars to them. A third tribe could have been heavily involved in trade and so connected him with Mercury, or healing and so with Apollo. Because of this, Toutatis is sometimes called either a title or a god type rather than the name of a particular god. This is fine as long as it is realized that to the ancients a title was often the same as a name, or that names had their origin in titles, and that a god type wasn't a category seen by ancient pagans, but one that we ourselves spin out of their deities. If, therefore, we are looking for a pan-Celtic deity, it is accurate to say that there was no Toutatis, but if we are looking on the level of individual tribes, there were many Teutates. In summary, then, there was no Celtic god Toutatis, but there were many Celtic gods Toutatis. He had his identity in the context of the tribe of which he was father, king, and god.